Welcome to Money Majlis. I'm Suvo Sarkar saying hello from the beautiful pink city of Jaipur in India. I'm here in Jaipur for the annual get-together of the alumni of the Stanford Graduate School of Business Executive Program. I'm in Jaipur with 70 other Stanford alumni for 3 days of networking, learning, and of course partying, but I've found time to record this podcast with my esteemed classmate Nicolas Sauvage. Nicolas is president of TDK Ventures, the corporate venture capital arm of TDK, and he and I will spend the next 80 minutes to talk about the business of CVCs. But first, a message from my 4 sponsors.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by MasterCard.
Money Majlis is sponsored by Weo Bank. Fuel your ambitions with banking designed to power your success. Discover more at weo.io.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
Well, let's start this episode with defining what a CVC is. A CVC, or corporate venture capital, is a setup that employs corporate capital directly into external startup companies. Whereas a normal VC firm invests primarily for financial returns, a CVC invests for both strategic and financial returns. In 2023, an estimated $55 billion was invested by corporates through CVCs into startups, a majority in early-stage startups. In the Middle East, the concept of CVCs is still new. A few banks in the region have started investing into fintechs, but very few have a dedicated fund or a dedicated process. My ex-employer, Emirates NBD, was one of the pioneers when they set up a $100 million CVC in 2022. Till date, they have reportedly invested 40% of their corpus in 10 startups, including into Newbridge Fintech, an innovative DIFC company that I happen to be the chairman of. To learn about Emirates NBD's corporate venture capital, I spoke to my ex-colleague Neeraj Makin, head of the venture fund and the group strategy head of Emirates NBD. He told me that the Emirates NBD Innovation Fund, as he calls it, was established with the vision to make strategic investments in startups focused on financial technologies, that is fintechs, and next-generation digital solutions. The mandate for the ENBD fund is to invest in a wide range of stages, from early stage to growth stage, depending on the strategic fit for the organization. The fund's investment period is evergreen, and it has invested in 10 startups across various geographic regions and has already had 1 successful exit. Thank you, Neeraj, for those inputs. Now let's move to my guest today, who is from TDK Ventures, which is onto its 3rd corporate venture fund. Nicolas Sauvage is the president of TDK Ventures, the corporate venture capital arm of TDK Corporation, a global leader in electronic solutions and advanced technologies. I guess all of us remember those TDK cassettes and tapes from our younger days, Well, at least some of us do. So, Nicolas is president of the venture capital arm of TDK Corporation. With $350 million in assets under management, TDK Ventures has backed as many as 42 digital and energy innovation startups, including the unicorns like Grok, Ascent Elements, and Silicon Box. For 5 consecutive years, Nicolas has been recognized on the Global Corporate Venturing Power List. Nicolas is also a published author on corporate venturing. He's been published in the Harvard Business Review, in the London Business School publications, and INSEAD publications. He is also the host of the Corporate Venturing Insider podcast. Do check that out. He serves on the boards of many companies, including Analog Inference, Autoflight, and of course, TDK Ventures. Nicolas is an alumnus of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, which he and I attended together for executive program on innovation in 2018. Yes, that's how I know Nicolas. We were in class together. He has also attended, of course, INSEAD, London Business School, and the ISEN Engineering School in France. He holds a corporate director certificate from Harvard Business School. Nicolas Sauvage, good morning, and so good to be with you in Jaipur, India, on the sidelines of the Stanford alumni reunion. I'm so glad we get to catch up like this after many years.
Suvo, it's always nice to see you, and what you're doing with this podcast is so good. So I'm really glad you invited me.
Nicolas, I'll jump straight into my first question. Over $55 billion was invested in 2023 by corporates into startups in the form of CVC investments, corporate venture capital. What are some of the factors that are driving legacy corporates to invest in startups? Why this race to invest in startups when corporates can obviously invest in their own people and their own systems? So why?
Well, first, I think corporations should invest in their people. They should invest in innovations. Corporate venturing is, and CVC in particular, are one tool in the innovation toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a company of, let's say, $500 million or more revenue, I think the question is you cannot afford not to have a CVC in your toolbox.
Yeah.
So I think the reason why so many corporations, and we're talking between 4,000 and 6,000 CVCs that are
Correct.
recorded by the GCV, the Global Corporate Venturing Association.
Yeah.
The reason there are so many corporations wanting to do CVCs is because they have identified the need to access insights on the future. And there's no better way, in a way, to learn about the future than talking to those who are building the future, the entrepreneurs who are in the trenches building that future. And you can't just talk to entrepreneurs if you do not have a corporate VC. And so I think if we think about this toolbox of innovations, and there are many, many ways to address innovations, and I expect corporations to already do that.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like working with entrepreneurs who are building the future.
So, Nicolas, does innovation have to be external as opposed to internal? I mean, if Blockbuster, just imagine Blockbuster, had invested into Netflix 20 years back, or if Nokia had invested in a CVC into Apple, do you believe that Blockbuster and Nokia might have survived or even thrived?
Well, there are two ways to answer. The first one is if they had a CVC, it would already be a mindset difference. It means they would have been open-minded to external innovations, something that could disrupt them. So I think, and this is probably why you see quite a delta in performance for corporations having a CVC versus not.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily because they have a CVC that's bringing good insights, although I would like to think so. It's the fact of creating a CVC in the first place means the management do want to understand what's changing outside and what could disrupt them.
Yep.
And rather than being surprised by disruption, they would embrace it. So if you think about Blockbuster, if they had a CVC, it means the CEO was actually already worried about what could disrupt them.
Yeah.
And they would have been more attuned to the changes that was happening And so it's not even the CVC investing in Netflix. Of course, that would have been an amazing thing for blockbusters to do.
Yeah.
But it's actually just having a CVC looking around, trying to identify what could change and bring that even innovation in. So blockbuster, I would think, and I don't know the specific beyond what's public, but I would imagine that they felt very safe until they were not safe. And the corporate VC probably allows you some kind of warning signals. Maybe a few years earlier, maybe 5 years earlier, which is what you need for a corporation, especially big corporations, to be able to start preparing for it, moving towards these new mega trends, which could disrupt your business.
Good segue for me, Nicolas, to ask you to help us define what is a CVC. Are there different paths that a corporate can take in investing in startups? There's always a strategic investment from a big corporate into a minority stake in a startup. Is that the only way?
Well, if we want to define corporate VC, I think we should think about corporate and VC. So it means this is a VC behaved firm that has limited partners as a corporation. Sometimes it's multiple corporations because the way the company is organized is through multiple entities. But let's say for now, it's just a single corporation investing in that corporate VC. And again, here you have granularity between its investments from the balance sheet or it's the investments from fund base that are still funded by this corporation. And so these corporate VCs are responsible to invest in startups like VCs do. It's just that the origin of the money invested comes from the corporation. And of course, it typically comes with responsibilities. Now, you ask about minority investments. Typically, VCs invest maximum up to 30%. It's very atypical to go beyond that. And I think for corporate VC, it's atypical for them to invest beyond 20%.
Is there a reason that is the case?
I think it's first because it would be a strong signal, which some people would actually perceive as negative signal, if a corporation through their corporate VC was to invest a big portion of the startup. It could imply that we want to control that startup. We may want to acquire it. I'm not saying it's a negative signal, but I'm saying it could be perceived as a negative signal. And if that is understood that way, it could limit that startup's ability to raise in the future. It could limit that company to win certain type of customers and win engagements with certain partners. It could limit their go-to-market. So I think it's quite healthy in terms of hygiene for corporate VCs not to exceed 20% of the ownership. And hopefully when they do invest, they invest together with other financial VCs and other corporate VCs.
Have you seen a model, Nicolas, where a few corporates together invest in a startup at industry level? Does it happen? Is it always one corporate and one startup?
We have a good example with Metalens, a company in Boston. They have a semiconductor process to revolutionize how optics work.
It's in Boston,
It's in Boston. And if you think about optics, like the glasses you're wearing today, that's a technology 600 years old. Which has not changed. And for the very first time, Metalens is introducing a semiconductor process to completely improve optics, which can be used on your mobile devices, for example. And so with Metalens, they were extremely smart in building syndicates of investors with financial VC, which allowed for quite some financial discipline, and a set of corporate VCs. TDK Ventures was one of them, but we had Intel Capital and Ventures and so on. And thanks to that, they had very nice partnerships with their corporations very early on. And it was good validation, it was good credibility statement, but it was also helping them de-risk both the technology and the go-to-market. And so I find that the CEO of Metalens, Rob, was extremely smart in choosing the investors. And of course, you want startups to be able to choose their investors. And when they're oversubscribed, they can actually choose those who are going to bring the maximum value. And that could be de-risking technology. It could be being a customer, early customer, even alpha customer. It could be finding customers for them. It could be about finding the right partners or the supply chain. And so I would say it's probably a really, really good best practice for a startup to choose carefully their CVCs at the time they need them. So you don't want to choose a CVC that's not needed just yet.
Yeah.
But also a mix of CVCs and VCs,
Mm-hmm.
because then it allows for a very nice pricing signal and valuation, which sets them for success for the next round. Because sometimes what I've seen is some corporate VCs care so much about strategic value
Yep.
and not financial value that they might actually overpay.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with overpaying the valuation is that the next round of funding becomes even more challenging,
Yeah.
and you end up with a situation where you may have a
Yeah.
down round.
Yeah. Understood. So tell me, do all CVCs have to morph into a JV or an acquisition? Or can the corporate continue to remain a minority shareholder forever? Does that ever happen? That you remain a minority shareholder
Well,
forever?
So first, I would say that if I was to simplify, and this is really a simplification because you have the full spectrum
Yep.
for corporate VCs.
Yep.
But let's put two types of corporate VCs. The corporate VCs, which is about exploitation of the current business,
Mm-hmm.
which is about helping the current business maybe get new go-to-market, maybe new technology, maybe new customers onto their platforms. This type of corporate VCs are really focused on strategic values that have a short-term benefits to
Got
their
it.
business
Got
growth.
it.
The other type of corporate VC are more on the exploration mission.
And using the Stanford model of exploitation versus
Exactly.
exploration.
So Suvo, you will remember our professor at Stanford,
Yeah,
Jesper
yeah,
Sorensen,
yeah.
explaining this exploitation and exploration.
It's an excellent concept, actually.
It's so important because when you frame corporate VCs,
Yeah.
they all have different motivations. They all have different strategies.
Correct.
And if they do their job well, they will actually bring maximum value regardless of being exploitation or exploration.
Okay.
But what they need to do is to be very explicit both to their corporation, to their partners, but also to the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
You don't want to portray yourself as an exploration mission if you're an exploitation and vice versa.
Yeah.
You would just disappoint the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so I've mentioned the exploitation, but exploration is basically when a corporate VC is looking at new business,
Mm-hmm.
new business model,
Yep.
new application, new use case, new technology that are not core to that corporation.
Yeah.
But this is where the corporation wants to learn more.
Mhm.
And this is back to what we said earlier in the interview. You want the corporation in an exploration mission to know what could disrupt you.
You're right.
What is a Netflix to Blockbuster?
Correct.
And actually, if I think about TDK, and many of your audience will remember TDK as a cassette.
Yeah, of course.
But TDK is a company that went from B2B to B2C with a cassette back to B2B. But the CDs and later streaming completely disrupted TDK.
Yeah.
And when I proposed a project of TDK Ventures to TDK and ultimately the CEO, he was so excited by the exploration mission because of the ability to identify what could disrupt TDK.
Yeah.
And the reason why he was so resonating with that is he was in charge of the TDK cassette business, who had been completely disrupted nearly by surprise by these new technologies.
Correct.
He did not want this to happen again to TDK.
Wow. Okay. So that's foresight, right? It's foresight in terms of thinking ahead and what's next, what's around the corner that you haven't seen.
Absolutely. And I want to finish answering your question about M&A.
Yeah.
That's something that should happen.
Yeah.
And again, with this exploitation and exploration, it would come with very different motivation. If it's exploitation in terms of finding the next adjacent market or adjacent technology, then yes, M&A could actually make sense. Now the question is, what's the likelihood of the corporate VC investing in the company that's most likely going to be that M&A target?
Correct.
Or would that corporate VC through the investment start to learn so much about the space that they realize actually the M&A target should be a different company? And so I think I want to go back to Jesper Sorensen, our professor at Stanford, because he had this beautiful analogy of corporate VC.
Yeah.
And if you remember, he had this massive mountain that he defined as the exploitation mountain.
Correct.
Where every companies are, including their competitors. And the job number one of the corporation is get to the top of that mountain.
Right.
Which you can define as revenue, profit, customer delight, up to you.
Yeah.
And you have other peaks, but you don't see them. It's a cloudy day. And the corporate VC is this tiny helicopter flying to different mountains and being able to tell whether the mountain is hostile or
Correct.
friendly.
Correct.
It's a big one
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
It's got grass or not.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
got all the animals you need or not.
Mhm.
And then fly back at very low cost and come back and say, okay, we don't want to go in this place.
Mhm.
This mega trend, this is not for us. But that one, this mountain, this is where we should go, and we go full speed. And so what's interesting is that you get the insights with maybe $2 million investment
Yeah.
into a startup or multiple startups that you due diligence.
Yeah.
And you are capable to go with higher confidence,
Mm.
higher quality of information into the right M&A, which may cost $500 million, $10 billion. But with $2 million, you get the insights that helps you to go with confidence with the right company in the right place. And of course, avoid going where you should not go in the first place, which sometimes you only learn after you've done an expensive M&A.
Correct. So that's a great analogy, Nicolas. Thank you for that.
Well, that's Jasper's.
Yeah, so we still carry our lessons forward. I read a research report recently which made two conclusions, interesting conclusions about CVCs. One is that startups with no CVC funding, as in only VC funding, were 2x more likely to bust, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So basically CVC funding reduces failure rates to 2% compared to 4% for VC funding. That's conclusion one. Conclusion two is that CVC-funded startups exit with a higher valuation, 20 to 25x for CVC versus 15 to 20x for VC. My question, Nicolas, is, A, do you believe this is the case? And what do startups gain from CVCs? You talked about how a corporate can gain and look at new peaks out there with the CVC. What is in it for the startup?
And it's actually back to what I think should be the case for corporate VCs, which is corporate VCs come with the ability to add superpowers that financial VC do not have by its definition, which is a superpower that comes from having this mothership. And with all the things that could come from that mothership. So a corporate VC that can bring the mothership as a customer or as a go-to-market or as a technology partner is going to increase the likelihood of that startup to be successful. And so I think the real question is how to design a corporate VC to leverage a superpower from the mothership in a way that helps the startups, but also helps the corporations learn more about the business. And what we find at TDK Ventures, and we can go into that, is if we define and design well what we call an equal win engagement, we are going to help the startup be more successful more quickly with less risk. But we are helping TDK to learn so much more at the same time as partners about the space. And in our case, we're an exploration mission. So we do not have knowledge about the space we're investing in beyond a due diligence that we would have conducted, what we call deep explorations. And so I think what's important maybe for your audience is to understand what we mean by the term equal win. Most times people would say win-win. But when it comes to a startup and a very big corporation, that very often look like a small win and a big win, which may feel fair. But 2-3 years later, whoever gets a small win will move on, probably not stay in the partnership, and whoever got the big win or they thought they had has nothing left because that party has left.
Correct.
And so what we spend a lot of time at TDK Ventures is try to define this equal win where there is high value on both sides.
Okay.
And if we do that, we get huge value. First, we learn as partners together at the same time.
Right.
There is a level of intimacy and respect. On top of that, we are building this amazing relationship with builders of the futures, these entrepreneurs, which we want this to be very, very long-term relationship. And I'm talking decades.
Correct.
And TDK has amazing examples of such partnerships even before I started TDK Ventures, which was ATL, which was a company that was invested by TDK. This was a startup when we invested. We built really good partnership with them, really good intimacy at management. Now they are fully into TDK, building massive value for TDK.
So Nicolas, TDK Ventures invests in a range of startups. You have 3 funds today, I believe, with 40 investments worth about $350 million US, 3 unicorns, that's impressive, and 1 IPO already. You invest globally in early stage startups that leverage fundamental material sciences. Yeah, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, does your team then need to be super technical? When a CVC is so specialized that you are investing in fundamental material sciences at the cutting edge of science, how do you ensure that you have the know-how to assess startups? How do you do your due diligence? And how do you identify what you call the king of the hill? Sorry, a few questions in there.
Yeah, quite a few questions. And maybe I will go back to that framework of this two grouping of exploitation and exploration.
Yeah.
If we were a CVC that have an exploitation mission,
Yeah.
current business and trying to have maybe adjacents, we would definitively have the expertise inside the mothership.
Correct.
So that would probably simplify how we could recruit our investment team. But in our case, we are looking at exploration, which means I need a team that's capable to do deep exploration into a topic we've never looked at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want this to be passion-based and driven by my team choosing the topics. Of course, they have to make sense in the scope of what TDK does.
Yeah.
But I want them to pick the topics that they are passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're an exploration mission, we are likely not to have, sometimes we do, but most likely we don't have that expertise inside TDK. And for that reason, I've only recruited in the investment team people who are very technical, who are not afraid to go deep into the technology, deep enough that they start to build unique insights, sometimes building contrarian views to what others think, and then be able to surface it back to the team, to our own team, and really welcome being challenged. Because what we want is to find the best possible opportunities.
Yeah.
We don't want to be right. We want to find the very best opportunities. And I'll give you an example that's very concrete, and maybe the audience will find it interesting to apply somehow in their own corporations, which is a devil's advocate session. So after our investment director have built conviction into a space, they believe the investment thesis is justified to make an investment. They found a startup they believe is a king of the hill, which basically for us means it has a potential to become market leader 5 to 7 years from now.
Okay.
They come to our full team to explain why they are so convinced we should go ahead with that investment. And our team, regardless of how positively they think about the investment, can only say why they would not invest in the company.
Okay.
And they cannot repeat someone else's point. So the idea is not to double down on someone else's point,
Understood.
but to give as much of the reasons not to invest.
So be the devil's advocate.
A pure devil's advocate, but really not trying to even start with, I like this market, or I think these entrepreneurs are amazing. But because when you do that, you're basically giving a chance for the person, the investment director, to latch on the positive. If you only hear the reasons why not to invest, you have to listen. And the why not to invest could be a yellow signal. It could be a red flag.
Got it.
It could be a blind spot, something we didn't even check, or a startup we didn't know about, or an incumbent who's already entrenched into this space. And the beauty of building with diversity of thoughts at the core of how we recruit very technical people is we end up with devil's advocate sessions that are extremely challenging for the investment director. Because they get to have a sense of all the reasons why we should not invest.
It's almost like a Shark Tank session.
It's very, very tough. It's very challenging. But what's nice is the rules are the same for everyone, and everyone knows the purpose is to improve decision making. So everyone understands there is no personal to it. It's really about us as a firm, as a VC firm, to make the best possible investment for our limited partners. And so when you think about this, the investment director probably have a lot to internalize. And so what we do is we give them the night. The following day or within 48 hours, they write down the response to all the challenges that was given by the team. Which means that it's not just about listening, not just internalizing, but actually writing it down, making sure that it was really understood, acknowledged, and maybe sometimes acted. What's interesting is I think, and I haven't checked the latest statistics, but half of the time that investment directors that was so convinced to go ahead with investments decides not to go ahead.
Really?
Which is really courageous. And this, I really appreciate when that happens because it tells me that the investment director is looking for truth and not being anchored by all the hundreds of hours of work that was sunk into that deep exploration and due diligence and and looking at this investment opportunity. But if they do decide to invest, I do not have a veto right by design. No one has. And we can go straight to the investment committee, which is 3 team members. And they are all corporate officers of TDK.
Yeah.
And it's the CFO, the CTO, and the equivalent of the CSO.
Yeah.
And if 2 votes yes, so then we proceed. And what is nice is that because we spend so much work upfront validating why we should invest, why we should not invest, then we end up with investment committee just having one question to answer, which is it an exploration mission? Is it really helping us to learn about the mega trends we want to learn about?
Correct. Interesting. So my question then, Nicolas, is how many startups do you evaluate as as an overall sample before you select one?
So the statistics is I don't think we have reached 9,000 startups, but more than 8,000 startups, and we invested in 40. And so think about us saying no to 200 startups and investing in one.
Before you said one. Before you said yes to one. And the other question.
But let me say something which is maybe not obvious for the audience.
Yeah.
It's easy to say no to 180 out of 200. It starts to be hard to tell no to the next 10.
Yeah.
It's extremely hard to say no to the next 9.
Understood.
Because at that point, you get to projects you love with entrepreneurs you love, and you can see how they would be successful, how they would bring value, how they contribute to society. And so when we say 1 out of 200, it basically means 1 out of 20 that we love, and we have to say no to 19.
But sometimes is it better than to spread your bets over the 20 with smaller amounts, or would you rather have a larger bet on the one you choose?
It's a very good question, Suvo. And our view is that we want to build true equal win partnerships, which means we want to be extremely helpful to the entrepreneurs and the startups. So not only we invest serious check size for the early stage they are, but very often we lead or co-lead. And when you lead and co-lead, you have a responsibility to build a syndicate. And we have a process called Building the Dream Syndicate, which means, if you remember what we said earlier in the interview, you want to see which CVCs, which VCs are going to bring maximum value at the right time.
Correct.
For the maturity of the startup. We take this on ourselves, and we try to find who are the best partners we trust to bring maximum value to the startup at the stage they are. And so you couldn't do that if our check size was divided by 20. At that point, we would just be an angel investor.
Correct.
I mean, we invest up to $5 million with our single LP funds, and we invest up to $10 million with our multi-LP fund, the decarbonization fund, Fund EX1. And so if you divide by 20, it becomes really meaningless in a way, and you wouldn't be able to expect to build intimacy with the entrepreneurs and the management team and really help them along the journey. And maybe here I want to talk about our core values, because I think every core VCs, corporate VCs need to have these core values. And one of the things that we've defined quite early is who are the customers of TDK Ventures. And because we have an exploration mission, because we believe in helping these impact scalers, we call them impact scalers because their life's mission, their project, is to contribute to society, to bring positive impact and to scale it. And we see our role as what I've coined on Medium impact scaler squared, which is if you're a good corporate VC or even a good VC, you help these impact scalers and many of them. So you're the impact scaler behind the impact scaler or impact scaler squared.
Understood.
And so you want to make sure you bring maximum values to the entrepreneurs.
Since you're on a mission of exploration, Nicolas, how do you define the boundaries of what you will do, what you won't do? I mean, you talked about the fact that you leave it to your analysts and to your investment directors to choose the projects. Now, what if a director chose the cutting-edge energy drink that will really transform how people, get energy from a drink? Is that aligned to TDK's mission in the future or not?
This is a great question. And so here I have to say I am extremely lucky. We are extremely lucky, is that our mission, our scope, our investment scope is TDK long-term strategy. So if it is in TDK's long-term strategy, this is in scope for us and for the team to build investment thesis into a given space through the deep explorations. And that TDK long-term strategy is extremely well documented every single year in the annual report. So if you want to know what's in scope for us, you just need to look at the TDK annual report and you would know it. Now, sometimes it's not quite obvious if something is in scope or not. It's kind of on the boundary of that box.
Yep.
And at that point, what we do is we assume it is in scope because it looks interesting. We build that conviction. And if we do end up wanting to make an investment, this is where investment committee is so important because there are 3 corporate officers that are capable to say with confidence, this is in or out of that TDK long-term strategy. And we had this example where we made investment proposals in the maritime space, which felt like it was in scope. It was not sure. And when we make the investment proposal, it was declined because it was not part of the TDK long-term strategy. It helped us to know what was in scope. We refined the scope.
Got it.
But our job as an exploration is also try to push the boundaries. So it's quite normal for us to be quite at the border
Edge
of that.
Got it. So should I or shouldn't I look forward to the TDK energy drink?
That would be out of scope. First, we are a deep tech investor. So we want to really invest in cutting edge technology. We invested in nuclear fusion, in battery recycling and upcycling.
Right.
Metalens being this optical with using semiconductor. We have invested in Singapore in Silicon Box doing very advanced chiplet packaging. We are investing in so many different topics that really we can contribute because of that superpower. If I think of TDK, what superpower would I bring to an energy drink? None of it. And it's very interesting to say that because if as a CVC I cannot bring a superpower to the companies I invest in, it means that the only thing I contribute is money. Which means what? It means that the entrepreneurs in the future, when they will be asked, what do you think of TDK Ventures? They would say, it was good. It was just money, but they didn't bring me anything else. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot. What we want is we want to help entrepreneurs be so much more successful contributing to society with their project that they rave about us. They will tell other entrepreneurs and other investors that working with us really helps them de-risk their project, accelerate their project, augment their project. And if we do that right over and over and over, we start to get this snowball effect where every entrepreneur understands the value we bring and becomes beautiful references for other entrepreneurs.
Got it.
And it's not a small thing because between an entrepreneur and entrepreneur, there is a high level of respect and things at stake. They would not recommend an investor they are not impressed with to another entrepreneur. And what we want is we want to be able to choose the very best entrepreneurs to share the journey with.
Correct. So virtuous cycle then, right? I like the concept you introduced of the superpower, the contribution from the corporate to the startup. You also use a technique, Nicolas, called backcasting, where you dream an ideal future state for a technology and work backwards to see what is missing. For new technologies that you're investing in, how do you even know what the ideal future state is?
Well, Suvo, first, I don't think anyone can forecast the future. But we can all dream about the future.
Okay.
All of us.
Yeah.
We can dream about the ideal state of the future of energy. Would we not want a future where energy is 100% green and nearly free, maybe even free? That would be a great future.
Of course.
And then if we backcast from that, what do we need? Well, we probably need nuclear fusion, maybe geothermal, and a number of solutions that are very, very green and continuous supply. We probably need then the grid to be modernized. We probably need transformers to service that grid. And so we can start to look at what's missing in terms of gap from today to there, to that ideal state of the future. And that's why we invested in Type 1 Energy, which is providing this amazing nuclear fusion stellarator technology. That's why we invested in Ampersand in Singapore that are building solid state transformers, which are so needed for the future of the grid. So we can identify these gaps between what is today and what the future needs.
Yeah.
And so I'm already hinting that we will probably invest in the grid technology at some point because that's probably also one of the gaps.
Correct.
Another ideal state of the future is what would be an ideal home.
Mhm.
One where you're comfortable, and if you're aging, maybe you have a robot that can cook for you, that can take care of some chores, that is really green, that is very comfortable,
Yeah.
despite all the weather that's happening outside. You can dream that and then look back and say, what am I missing? Well, maybe I'm missing a humanoid robot that can do things that I have to do today. But the humanoid robot needs to understand exactly my intent. Maybe I need generative AI to help the robots to know what I mean. Maybe I need the robot to be even more proactive so it doesn't wait for me. And so you can see all the gaps we have today, which is
Correct.
we need humanoid robots that are really good at doing things that are very diverse. And that's why, for example, we invested in Agility Robotics, which is the king of the hill in terms of humanoid robots. We have just invested in another company that does a dog robot, and this is for industrial purpose.
Yep.
It's not yet announced, so I can't say the name, but this is very exciting. We will announce this in December. This is also why we are looking so carefully about generative AI.
Yeah.
But we're not looking at generative AI for the sake of it, but for that ideal state of the future. How does it fill that essential gap to get there?
Give us a few examples. You talked a few there, Nicolas, about some of your most exciting investments. What are you most excited about? You have 40 investments today, and I know they're all equal to you. They're all your sons and daughters. But if you were to pick and choose a couple, what would you choose?
Well, first, I think it's a very personal answer. I'm sure my investment team would have their own preferred.
Yep.
I do have, clearly my most preferred is a type 1 energy. I think that the potential of getting continuous, infinite, safe, green energy to everyone is critical. When we talk about AI and its potential for inclusiveness, for giving amazing education, like personalized tutor to every child in the world, it needs two things. It needs compute, it needs energy. Compute, we've invested in Grok, we invested in Sage's AI. So I feel like we are doing well on the compute side. But the energy side, we are just not prepared as a civilization. And nuclear fusion is a safe approach for that infinite type of nearly free energy. And so this is one of my most preferred, because if you think about geopolitics, imagine when the worlds change to full nuclear fusion. And I would even actually be even more bullish. Imagine us as a civilization 100 years from now. We would be looking back at today thinking, why did we not accelerate nuclear fusion earlier? What did we wait for? And I think that corporate VCs and VCs have an opportunity to invest in the non-obvious, in the risky. In the case of nuclear fusion, you could argue very risky investments, which has a great deal of importance for civilization, for society, and for our planet. So I think type 1 energy is definitively my top portfolio company in terms of its potential for drastic improvements for our planet.
But tell me, do you sometimes double down on certain investments that you already made?
Absolutely.
And pull out of some others?
Absolutely.
And how do you decide that?
Like a VC. So maybe I should put some granularity. I'll say like a VC, but with a strategic hat. So like a VC in that we need to, and this is something that the Professor Ilya Strebulov is writing in his Venture Mindset book, which is learning to know when to double down and when to quit. And this is very tough, and it's not an exact science. But typically, you're looking at doubling down when the company is really on the right trajectory to contribute to society. And to really have the impact they intended. At the same time, you don't want to continue putting more money into investments that don't fulfill the earlier premise of that impact to society. Because that dollar should go to the ones that actually have more likelihood to be successful. And so we have a finite resource. It's called a fund, and our funds are $150 million. And so we have to choose between our portfolio companies when we do follow-on investments.
Right.
And we have to pick the winners. We are looking for the king of the hill. We invested for those we believe would be the king of the hills. And if we believe at some point they would not be, then we have to know when to quit. So I think doubling down and quit is a very hard discipline to do.
Yep.
And in our case, we really need to think both as a VC firm, the financial discipline that's needed to be between doubling down on an investment or quitting and not joining a follow investment.
Yeah.
And we also have to think about it as a strategic VC, which is, are we getting the right equal win engagements where we're helping the startup to be successful and we are learning with them? And so I'm putting a caveat here because as much as we want to be very VC mindset and disciplined, we are going to look at which startups we still have an opportunity to help and make them successful. And this is back to that superpower, which is if we have a belief that we can still help them be successful through our superpower coming from our mothership, we might still do a follow-on when we wouldn't have otherwise. But typically you want to be able, and this is what our professor Ilya Strebulov from Stanford wrote in his Venture Mindset book, is that discipline of knowing when to quit is very hard. It's not a science. But if you look at the facts and you look at your investment thesis from when you invested in the first place, are they still the king of the hill? Is it still the market that's moving the way you expected? Have the regulations improved or not? And for example, with the new administration in the US, we have to look back at our investment thesis and see which ones would actually benefit and which ones wouldn't. For example, nuclear fusion is probably one that we believe, and there is no yet certainty about it, but we believe it touched on national security to have this continuous supply of energy. It's very likely that they will do well moving forward, especially you have Elon Musk as maybe a super technical advisor who could be actually helping making good decisions. So all of that means to say that when you do a double down or quit, you really want to go back to your investment thesis. And maybe I should explain what is in an investment thesis at TDK Ventures and see how it changed over time. Has it improved? Has it degraded? How is the scorecard that you had defined for your first investment moved on?
Interesting. And when you double down, Nicolas, how much of a decision is based on social environmental impact versus financial returns? What is more important to you?
That's what I'm saying, is that both are important. But we would not double down on something we believe will not get financial returns. And we probably would not double down if the company did a pivot and no longer has that societal impact. So think about our three investment criteria. VC type returns. And VC type returns means we believe there is a probability that's not too small of a 50 times return.
Wow. Okay.
But it could be 50% chance it goes to zero. But it has that potential of a very, very big return. And as you build a portfolio and the power law starts to kick in, you might end up with many not doing so well, but some and a few doing extremely well. And that returns the funds. And so when we're looking at doubling down on the financial criteria, we're looking at VC type returns. That's the first investment criteria. The second investment criteria, and I'm not ranking them, I'm just listing them, is contribution to society. And that one is extremely important, and it resonates with even the charter from 1935 of TDK, which is we exist to contribute to society. And so here we are looking at what is the real impact, the net impact of that company, that startup, if they become extremely successful.
Do normal VCs have that kind of criteria, social impact, or is it only CVCs that bring that into the picture?
And maybe I will answer that after I explain the investment criteria, because that's worth doubling down also on this. But contribution to society is our investment criteria.
Second, yeah.
And then a third one is a strategic value. And here we have a twist because most corporate VCs might say, what do we get? Here it's what strategic value do we bring to the entrepreneurs, to their project, to their startups.
Got it.
And it's important because we see it as an equal win, which is if we help them succeed, of course we are going to learn with them. If you go with this give first mindset, you're going to get way more learning and insights, and you're going to be part of the journey for much longer than your check size actually warrants. And so when we look at follow investments, we are looking back at these three investment criteria. Do we still believe that $1 we add on that follow investments has a VC type return? And that's only true if the probability of success has improved. So it's no longer maybe it was 50% chance it goes to zero when we invested in seed, and Series A it's only 20%. And maybe the best outcomes start to be even better.
Correct.
And so even though the valuation has increased, we still are in that zone of VC type return. Do we still believe the impact to society is really big? Do we still believe that we are bringing really good value from our mothership with many engagements or even the mothership's own customers to them? If we still believe in that, we would double down.
Understood. That's very clear. Very clear. Going back to the earlier question about VC versus CVC in terms of social impact. Have you seen VCs thinking of that very seriously?
I think many CVCs values will trickle down from the mothership.
Okay.
And many motherships do have some level of social impact mandate. And maybe we're changing the words, and maybe we now call it, our CEO has a very good term, which is pre-financial, because everything we do should at some point become a financial metric. And so how do we contribute to society? In a way, if you are a corporation that is focused to contribute on society like TDK has done since 1935, you can see it as selfless. And I think there is a level of that. But there is also a level of, if you're focused on contribution to society, it means that you are thinking both on value creation and value capture. And if you do that consistently, you're going to grow as a company and you're going to do well and going to do good.
Correct.
And so I think there is a level of VC and CVC is going to look at, is this project really going to resonate with society? And so there is a level of contribution to society that kicks in anyway in terms of the potential of a startup to do extremely well. If it's not valuable to society, it's likely not going to be a big success. And here, of course, I'm talking about deep tech. In deep tech, it's so hard, it takes so long. If you're not actually bringing people along with a very purposeful mission, you're probably never going to succeed.
But Nicolas, have any of your investments failed so far? And what have you learned from those failures?
I think, and here I think it's very atypical, so I don't want this to be misunderstood. We have 40 portfolio companies today, and we have 2 that has ceased operation.
Okay.
It's not a normal number. You would expect probably 15 to 20 by now after 5 years, because we invest so early in seed and Series A is a majority of our investments. We did have challenges for sure. Things we did not expect, regulations changing or regulations not changing quickly enough. I think what we've learned through the process of all these challenges and things that takes way longer than we expected is being very, very truthful and honest and reflective about our investment thesis. And maybe this is where I want to explain our investment thesis. Investment thesis is basically a document where you list, after a long, deep exploration and you learned a lot about the space, you list 4 things. What we know, which is what we've learned, what we believe are the facts. Then we list what we don't know, things that we don't know, how the regulation will change, how technology that's emerging could compete. We just don't know. But we list it because that's an honest way of saying what we don't know at this point. But also it helps the team to know that, okay, you are listing that you don't know. There's no point for me to actually challenge you on this. You're being clear. This is something you don't know. The third one is, what do we believe? what do we believe to be true? And this is where you have a lot of opinions, very informed, research-based opinions, but still opinion. It's a belief system.
Yeah.
And the fourth one is the KPIs. What do we want to see a startup in a given space to become this king of the hill with what we know, what we don't know, and what we believe if it's fully or partially proven. And with that document, we are capable to decide if we should invest in a given startup or even invest in the space. Sometimes we end up with an investment thesis, which is, this is not a space we want to invest today.
Yeah.
There is too much that needs to change for us to invest.
Understood. That's interesting. That brings me to my next question, which is, what do you believe is the model oversight for a CVC in a corporation? Because we all agree that agility is key. So given that, should it be headed by the chief strategy officer, the relevant business unit head for the technology, or an externally hired VC expert like you probably joined TDK Ventures? What is the ideal model, or is there an ideal model at all?
Well, first, I was definitively not an expert in VC. The first time I thought about doing a corporate VC or VC ever was during the SEP program.
Stanford.
That's where we met
Yes.
Suvo.
Yes.
And that was in 2018. So before I proposed a project, I had zero experience running a VC or a CVC.
That's amazing.
So first, I think there was a level of naivety as well as amazing mentors along the path. And here I still want to credit our professor Jesper Sorensen about framing it so well about exploitation and exploration.
Correct.
Professor Ilya Strebulov being so good at telling us everything that would be reasons for a CVC to fail, which helped me in my design.
Right.
And Paul Holland, who was a GP at Foundation Capital for nearly 20 years,
Correct.
who helped me to understand how to reconcile the why you should do it and all the things that could go wrong. So in terms of the reporting line for a corporate VC, I think it really depends.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to this exploitation versus exploration.
Yeah.
If it's an exploitation mission, you probably want the business group, or you probably want the CTO, maybe the CSO, to be the one driving that CVC.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure there is a tight alignment between the current business and where you're going to invest.
Correct.
If you're, however, in an exploration mission, which is it's in markets you're not in today, it's new technology, it's new market, new use case, new business model, and so on. There's no one in the organization whose job is that.
Yeah.
And so typically you would end up with a CEO as a best reporting line because they are ultimately responsible for moving the corporation in the right direction in the unknown sometimes. And if you have a really good CSO, that's probably also a good option. But if you go into anything that's too tied to the current business, you're probably going to end up with challenges between the design that's needed for an exploration mission and the reporting line having their own KPIs and short-term needs. And you're going to have these conflicts that typically don't work out very well.
And is the CFO a very relevant person in this whole process? I mean, chief financial officers aren't always chief future officers. Given that, how much do you think a CFO should be involved?
That's a really good question. So first, I think there are actually, let me try to make a simplification again. Again, this is such a spectrum of CFOs.
Yeah.
But let me group them into two for big corporations, because that's what we are talking about.
Yeah.
You have the CFOs that have huge expertise in running big corporations, and they are very effective at it. And then you have CFOs that actually are very good at risk-adjusted pricing. And they are actually more capable to understand that a small check in a very risky startup are actually a good risk-adjusted pricing.
Yep.
And if you have that type of CFO in your organization, absolutely have them in the investment committee.
Okay.
However, if you have a CFO who only talks about hundreds of millions of dollars, otherwise they would not wake up in the morning, do not have them in the investment committee and do not have them in the reporting line. So
Okay.
I'm going to be maybe very challenging, but I think the CFO aptitude of understanding risk-adjusted pricing and valuation all the way to extremely risky investments at very low valuation is such an important skill, but that's not shared with every CFO.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, Nicola, you recently wrote a paper in the Harvard Business Review, congratulations, about using net promoter scores from startup founders to judge the success of a CVC. And I believe TDK Ventures scored an NPS of 80%. Tell us a bit more about your thesis on this, on NPS, and how does TDK achieve a score so high?
The reason I wrote this article is because I believe VCs and CVCs should really see themselves as serving the entrepreneurs.
Okay.
If you think about your mission is to help entrepreneurs be successful,
Hmm.
you invest money in these startups because you believe it will bring value back to you.
Right.
Financial, and if you're a corporate VC, strategic. You do not invest in these entrepreneurs assuming they are not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So what I find interesting, and this is all around the world, typically when you give cash to someone,
Yep.
you're the customer.
Mm.
And so it's very counterintuitive to think about a VC or a CVC giving cash to a company, a startup, and not being the customer. And you end up with very interesting behaviors that comes from that. But the reality is we get so much more value out of this trade of cash. We get equity. And the reason we invest is because we believe this equity is worth way more than the cash we are giving. So in essence, we are not the customer. They are the customer.
Right.
They are the one who are giving us something more valuable for that
Correct.
cash, this
Correct.
equity. And what I find very interesting is that this mindset change of thinking of the entrepreneurs as a customer allows for so many good behaviors in helping entrepreneurs being successful.
Right.
It's not about telling them what to do. It's about working with them, brainstorming with them, challenging them, but making sure that they have the maximum support and guidance and information as possible for them to make the decision.
Correct.
And so the reason I wrote this article is to show a very practical way of implementing a customer mindset for the entrepreneurs. And NPS is one solution, but it's
Right.
such an easy, nearly free solution.
Yeah.
So in the article, I basically show how we send an email to at least 3 people in each of our portfolio companies.
Yeah.
And it's an email I send myself.
Yeah.
And I sent about 200 last year, and I will do it again this year. And it's a very simple email, and it's not using any software.
I
It's
saw
basic-
that. It's a very simple pre-formatted email, which
Absolutely.
you've been kind enough to enclose the article for other services to use.
Absolutely. It's just an email from me to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the question is very simple. It's from 1, never, to
Yeah.
10, absolutely.
Yeah.
How likely would you recommend TDK Ventures to another entrepreneur?
Correct.
And that's actually even more challenging than a normal NPS survey because
Yeah.
it's no longer recommending a toaster to a friend and family.
Yeah.
It's recommending an investor from an entrepreneur to an entrepreneur. They are not going to recommend you unless they are delighted.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second question is about how well are we doing for you, which is always full of golden nuggets. Things we didn't realize was a big deal, and we realize it is,
Yeah.
which helps our process to improve, and we double down on the good things. And then we have the third question. It's only 3 questions. And the third question is, what can we do better for you?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that because the second question is turned positively, it gives a license for the
For them
entrepreneurs to
to-
be a bit more challenging on the third one.
Correct.
And there are times where we are totally surprised by things we could have done or we could have improved or we didn't think about.
Yeah.
And we have improved our team formation from that feedback. We have
Yeah.
improved our processes from that feedback. I could give maybe 2 or 3 examples that maybe are concrete.
Yeah.
The very first time we did the NPS survey, we were so surprised. We had 3 of our portfolio companies saying, please help us with marketing.
Mm-hmm.
We are TDK Ventures, a deep tech investor, a corporate VC.
Yeah.
We would not expect to be helping on marketing, but that was the expectation. So we say, okay, let's recruit a marketing principal who can help our early stage portfolio companies with marketing.
Okay.
And I mean, sometimes we invest in AM batteries, for example, when it was 2 part-time professors when we invested, or Metalens was 10 PhDs when we invested.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about marketing,
Correct.
but they are so smart. So they just need some help and guidance. And because we provide a service for free, there is no incentive for us to be like consultants and keep forever, but just give the right guidance and maybe training for them to know what to do. Another one which was surprising from the very first NPS survey was one of our investors was very disappointed that the level of due diligence was very, very heavy for a very small check size.
Okay.
Well, small. It was $1 million. But they did expect $2.5 million because that was our maximum check size at the time.
Correct.
And what we realized is that we never had communicated with them that the check size would be decided at the end of a due diligence. And so they were surprised by it. And so what we've done is a very simple process change, which is when we first start a due diligence, we make that clear to them, just the expectation setting. And we actually even map how the due diligence is going to run and how heavy or light it's going to be depending on the stage of the company. That's such a simple change. But if we had not asked a question, and we had asked a question to many of our portfolio companies and only one was disappointed. But if we didn't know that, we would not have improved the process. We would probably have disappointed 3, 4, 5 portfolio companies in the future. So that's the type of things you learn from this NPS survey that helps as a firm, as a VC firm, to keep improving.
Very interesting. And that brings me to my next question, a good segue for that actually. If I look at successful examples of successful CVCs, let's say Intel Capital and DocuSign. Intel provided access to technology and customer access to DocuSign. Google Ventures and Uber, Google provided the know-how on maps and technology, obviously, right? Or Qualcomm and Fitbit, where Qualcomm provided semiconductor-related support. In the Middle East, we recently had PayPal Ventures investing into Tabby, which is, buy now, pay later startup. Now, apart from patience, you talked about the superpower that a corporate can bring into a startup. My question to you, Nicolas, is how do you develop a shared vision for the partnership when the startup and the investing company might have very different things that they expect from the collaboration, right? How do you align these two objectives?
Well, actually, I would disagree. You have to start with that.
Okay.
You have to start with a shared vision and a shared purpose. You're never going to reach what we define as equal win engagement earlier if you don't have that.
Okay.
So I would really challenge that when you look for investment as a corporate VC, you're looking for entrepreneurs who are building the future you want. And if they are building the future you want, then you're going to want to help them succeed. Now, it's interesting you mentioned patience. And here, one of my key learning of venture capital is that you need to find this mix of patience and impatience.
Okay.
You need to be patient capital because it takes 7 to 10 years for a company to really be successful. I mean, I'm looking at Grok, which is now such a huge success in the AI inference space.
Correct.
But they started in 2016. It's an overnight success that took 8 years.
Correct.
So you need this patience with a sense of purpose. That's very important. But the impatience comes with a sense of urgency. I talked about nuclear fusion. And this is one where I want to apply both patience with a sense of purpose and the impatience with a sense of urgency. Because if we don't start investing in nuclear fusion today, we're not setting ourselves as a society up for success in the future. We're already seeing all the challenges we have with the climate changes. How do we mitigate? How do we improve? That comes with a sense of urgency. And so when I think about venture capital, it's really about looking at everything that can go wrong with an investment. But if they are successful, how successful could they be? And if it could be extremely successful, then you need to apply both patience and impatience with that investment.
Interesting. Very well put. Now tell me, connected question, Nicola. How do you then balance the cultures of the corporate and the startup? Do you keep a Chinese wall, but then you're not imbibing the culture of the startup which you want to in terms of innovation and everything else? Has investing through your CVC changed the innovation culture of the mothership, TDK? Is TDK itself a changed company now, given TDK Ventures?
So there are a few questions. So let me talk about the Chinese wall for a second, because this is really important for your audience
Yeah.
who are thinking about designing a CVC.
Yeah.
The Chinese wall is very important for two reasons. First one is to protect the corporation.
Okay.
You do not want to create a risk of being sued for violating trade secrets, because the CVC would have been a conduit between the entrepreneur's information to the corporation.
Right.
So having a Chinese wall is critical to protect the corporation from any liability.
Okay.
This is number one. Number two is simply and very importantly about your reputation as a corporate VC.
Yep.
Entrepreneurs are sharing everything with you during the due diligence. You get to know the salary of everyone. You get to know all the IP and patents. You get to know all the challenges they faced in the past. This is like opening a book before you get married. And so what you don't want is them to fear there is even a perception of you being able to share something back to the corporation. So the Chinese wall is extremely important. And at TDK Ventures, for example, a very concrete step we did was we have our CRM tool, Monday.com, which is not even used in TDK.
Yep.
No one in TDK can access the information from entrepreneurs. They just don't have access to it.
Okay.
And we can prove they don't have access to it. So I just wanted to talk on the Chinese wall because most people think that this is something optional.
Okay. It's not.
You actually need to do it for both protecting your mothership and your reputation as an investor.
Understood. But talking of the cultural change, do you think TDK has changed as a company given all the greenfield investments you're doing?
So what's interesting is I think TDK is changing rapidly in the last 5 years.
Okay.
And we are just one of the elements of change. They have, for example, started an incubator that was separate from TDK Ventures,
Okay.
which, by the way, I recommend your audience to consider to always have it separate because the outside in versus inside out innovation discipline is so different. It has to be driven by different people who wake up in the morning with very different motivations.
Got it.
We also created regional headquarters with much more empowerment and transparency. We created a corporate innovation, corporate marketing and incubation organization that's really trying to increase our antenna signal, receiving the market changes and everything linked to our customers and partners. So TDK is definitively in that massive transformation. Actually, I would call it a TDK transformation.
Okay.
And we are part of it. And so for me to be able to say that TDK Ventures is influencing TDK would be misstated.
Okay.
But what we see is we have a number of opportunities where we share information that only us can collect from entrepreneurs that helps TDK decide where to go and where not to go.
Right.
We have a very interesting program also called the Fellowship Program inside TDK Ventures, where we take someone very high potential in TDK.
Yep.
They come 6 months full-time in TDK Ventures and they learn the venture mindset. They learn about assessing a market, assessing a technology, deep diving, conducting deep exploration, being challenged on building the investment thesis. And what we believe is after these 6 months, when they go back to their sending companies or maybe a different part of TDK, they bring a very different outlook into how to look at innovations both internally and externally. And so this fellowship program, we have one fellow coming in every 6 months.
Interesting.
And every 3 months, another one. And so what that means is that we always have 2 fellows in parallel.
Got it.
And this, I think, is going to take maybe 5 years or 10 years, but we are building this alumni group of fellows across all TDK with a consistent learning of venture mindset, which is going to help this connecting tissue inside TDK.
Interesting.
And that, I believe, is going to be even more meaningful in that TDK transformation than what we do at TDK Ventures, which is more deep exploration after deep exploration after deep exploration.
So bit by bit, you're actually circulating a culture of innovation and venture into TDK's main the mothership company.
Absolutely. And this, for the audience, what I would say is that this is a partnership between the human resources team
Right.
of TDK
Yeah.
and TDK Ventures. And so if you want to have this osmosis
Yes.
between the corporation and the CVC, you really need the partnership of the human resources who also want to incubate and to grow this venture mindset.
Yes.
And we're creating this osmosis through fellowship program.
Yeah.
It could be done in other ways. It could be people coming for 3 years and then going back.
Correct.
We haven't done that because we want to have actually more cadence, more frequency.
Yeah.
We want to expose more high potential team members in TDK. But this is this type of partnership that helps influence the culture of tomorrow.
Understood. Excellent. Now, let me ask you a personal question now, Nicolas. As president of TDK Ventures, you manage 40 startups. It's like a startup CEO stress multiplied 40 times. How do you chill and how do you de-stress? How do you keep that smile on your face?
Well, first, I have so many friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are just here in Jaipur with Stanford Executive Program alumni, and we get to share our struggles and our challenges very openly. I love to learn. And to be honest, my best way to de-stress is to learn new things. So I do love to spend my weekend just learning about new things and watching even YouTube videos about a new topic.
So the week is not enough for you to learn, the weekend also?
It's what I guess is amazing. And maybe for the audience who are thinking about doing corporate VCs, I like to think that there are two types of people. The people who are builders, these entrepreneurs, and people who want to help builders. And if you are in the second type like me, where you want to be helping others to build the future, and you love to learn, this is the best job in the world. You learn every single day. Actually, one thing that we do at TDK Ventures, which maybe is an interesting setup, which I haven't seen anywhere else, is we allocate 20% of our week on reflection and collaboration.
Interesting.
And so the Friday afternoon is called blocked time. No one can have meetings. No one can interrupt someone else. And that's meant for everyone to reflect on the week, finish their meeting notes, and write a weekly update. And that weekly update is basically, what did I learn? Not what did I do, but what did I learn during the week? That I think some of the team, if not all the team, will find interesting to learn. It's also where we put the blockers, where we ask for help on something. And then the Monday morning is purely focused on reading everyone's weekly updates. And maybe when you see the blockers, you say, hey, I can help you with this. I can help you with that.
Wow. A very, very interesting way of...
It's very interesting, but what that means is your Monday morning, in 2 hours, you get to read the weekly updates of our team, and we're 35 now. You get to learn 35 times 40 plus hours of learning in 2 hours. And this is like not diluted. It's accelerated learning for everyone. And this is also an opportunity for collaboration. And then one more thing we've done, which I think is more common, is once a week, and for us it's Wednesdays, everyone comes to the office. But they don't come in the office to go on their laptop and do emails. They come to the office to really be together, brainstorm together, spend time to get to know each other, and collaborate. And maybe work as a small team somewhere on a project. And that creates this team spirit and collegiality that I think is so important. And to be honest, the only downside of this is that we have to size the office for the size of the team. But beyond that, it's only positives.
You still didn't answer my question. What do you do to chill? Is it only watching YouTube videos of new things, or is there something else you do?
I just love learning, and this is, of course I watch some movies with my wife, and we love to talk and have coffee together. My weekends is basically spending time with my wife and just having a good time together.
Excellent. No better
Uh,
time than that. Yeah.
Yeah, many people don't agree or realize it, but I'm an introvert. So my weekend is recharging just by being quiet and reading and watching videos and being with my wife, who's also an introvert. So it works really well.
Excellent. My final question, Nicolas. As some of my audience members would want to set up corporate VCs or are part of corporate VCs, what should one watch out for? What should one not do setting up a corporate VC?
I think let's start with a to-do. I think you should leverage the ecosystem. What's interesting is that if you talk to any other corporate VC, typically they're willing to help. They are willing to give guidance.
Okay.
I found it extremely helpful when I started TDK Ventures to have so many people willing to share best practices, what not to do, what to do. And so I started this podcast, Corporate Venture Insider, exactly for the same reason, which was to make sure that anyone who wants to learn about the best practices of corporate venturing and what to do and what not to do would be shared with everyone. And so I think I'm now at podcast number 93.
Wow.
And it's all amazing people who have shared really amazing golden nuggets. And so if you're thinking about starting a CVC, of course, I would say watch a podcast.
Yeah.
Try to choose probably the interviewees that are in your industry. So at least you have a good benchmark.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that everyone I've interviewed agreed to be interviewed because they want to be helpful. Do not hesitate to reach out to them because they actually are willing to help any CVCs do a good start.
Wow. Okay. So that's great. What should one not do while doing a CVC?
I think the first thing I would say is don't start without a strategy that's well aligned with the management of the corporation.
Yeah.
I think the why is probably, let's give a fake number, 50% of the work.
Okay.
So if you do not have a good alignment on the why you do the CVC and your CEO and the board of directors and some of the management team members don't necessarily agree with it, you're setting yourself for failure. And so make sure that you have a good alignment on the why without rushing.
Yeah.
And Suvo, when we met was summer of 2018.
Correct.
And at that point, I went to tdk.com and realized they don't have a corporate VC. And thanks to what we learned during the Stanford Executive Program, I had a good start for proposing a CVC with all the right rationales and what to avoid. But that project was devoid of what the strategy of TDK should be about for the CVC. And so the first few iterations was basically people saying no. It did not help. I was not Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. I'm not in Tokyo. And I came from a very fresh acquisition.
Yeah.
But through the iterations, I got to understand how the CVC's design should be adjusted to fit the TDK strategy that would resonate with TDK. And so I would say that half of the design of TDK Ventures was what are the best practices for any CVC. You talked earlier about agility, but I think it's more about speed.
Okay.
But what was important was all this challenge when people were telling me why it did not fit what TDK needed. And so the rest of the 50% of the design was all about things that was adjusting the design to what TDK needed. And that took from the summer to December to get many people saying no, but always with good reasons, to adjust the design. And when I arrived at the final presentation to the CEO in December of 2018, it was a perfect fit because it had all the best practices embedded, plus what was needed to be bespoke for TDK, which meant that I had the management team in agreement, I had the CEO in agreement. Afterwards, we went to the board of directors that was in agreement. And what's interesting is that since that moment until today, and we are November 2024, we have the same design. We have nearly not changed the design in terms of strategic direction and exploration mission and taking TDK long-term strategy as our investment scope. So having had so much upfront time spent on strategy is helping us to execute on the strategy and to be very predictable and credible to all our stakeholders. So I think what not to do is to rush to do a CVC because it feels cool or it feels like this is a good thing to do. Spend time to make sure you have a really good alignment with your stakeholders.
Excellent. And Nicolas, in 6 years, you transformed TDK Ventures to one of the best performing CVCs in the world, acknowledged as one of the best across all the CVCs. So well done on that. Congratulations.
Actually, I want to challenge that. I think we have a good start, but we're not yet successful. We haven't helped TDK build billion-dollar businesses yet. And we definitively have not yet returned more cash from our funds. So we haven't done a fund returners yet. So I think we are hopeful that the next 5 years will prove us to be successful. But today we are not yet that success. So I think we have a good start. We love what we are doing. We have an amazing team that's passionate about helping entrepreneurs. We have an amazing portfolio of companies that really build the future. So we can feel good about what we do every day and our decision-making that keeps improving. But I think we still have to see that this is turning out the way we want it to be.
I'm sure that will happen in the near future, Nicolas. Thank you so much for your time today on the sidelines of the Stanford Alumni Reunion in Jaipur, India. We had an amazing 3 days of learning and networking in this beautiful pink city. We loved it. And I'm so glad that you and I could catch up, in the hotel lobby with some background noise on this important talk of CVCs, which I'm sure will benefit our listeners a lot. So thank you for all those gems of wisdom. I wish you the very best in your exciting journey with TDK Ventures. And Nicolas, I'm sure we'll talk again once your AUM crosses $1 billion, which I'm sure will happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years, maybe earlier. Who knows?
Suvo, you have a deal. Let's meet again. We will meet again before that.
Yeah.
But let's make sure that the next podcast will be when we do that.
Thank you so much, Nicolas.
Thank you, Suvo.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by MasterCard.
Money Majlis is sponsored by WeO Bank. Fuel your ambitions with banking designed to power your success. Discover more at weo.io.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto as a service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
That was a very interesting conversation with my friend and Stanford colleague, Nicolas Sauvage. If you already have a CVC in your organization or you're planning to set up one, those inputs from his experience should be useful. I would say very useful. So please share this episode with relevant colleagues from your company. Till next Friday, goodbye. 2 more episodes to go for Money Majlis Season 1, and both are unmissable episodes with 2 different gurus in 2 different fields. So keep listening and keep sharing. And I can't wait for Season 2 to start in February. Till we meet again, stay well and do good.